Hi. My guest today is Jonathan Maberry, and he's an award-winning author. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, his information and website will be listed in the show notes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, and the information will also be listed in the description. So thank you very much, and I'm going to read his bio. Jonathan Maberry is a New York Times bestselling author, #1 Audible bestseller, 5-time Bram Stoker Award winner, 4-time Scribe Award winner, Inkpot Award winner, comic book writer, and producer. He's the author of 52 novels, 16 short story collections, 28 graphic novels, 170 short stories, 14 nonfiction books, and has edited 26 anthologies. He's written comics for Marvel, IDW, Dark Horse, and others. And the movie Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is based in part on his 2009-2010 run on the comic. His Joe Ledger thrillers are being developed for TV by the director of the John Wick films. He's also the president of the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers and editor of Weird Tales magazine. You can find him at www.jonathanmaberry.com. And as I mentioned, those will also be listed in the show notes and in the description. So I hope you enjoyed my chat with Jonathan. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you. All right. Welcome, Jonathan. Thanks so much for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate this.
Oh, my pleasure, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Yeah, outstanding. And for everybody listening, we connected because I was in a masterclass on short stories that Jonathan gave. It was about almost a week and a half ago now. And it was just fabulous. And then you were so gracious and kind with your information in that masterclass. And remember, you said people could reach out to you if you had story questions. You said, "Hey, don't send me something to read because you're reading a ton of stuff." But
well, I mean, the whole thing about working with other writers, especially those on the way up, is we in the business. There's a myth that writing is competitive, and that those who are in don't want to let other people in because of the competition. And that's the exact opposite of the truth. The truth is the industry grows and prospers when there are more good writers who are well informed, as well as being good writers. I mean, and the well-informed part is really critical. So if we can share that information in different ways, I do mine to raise money for charities, but I also do the Writers Coffee House, which we do every month. It's a free 3-hour networking thing. The idea is to get as many writers up to speed with not only the skills of writing, but the understanding of the business of publishing, because we want them to prosper. The more good writers out there, the more good works will be out there, and the more that'll attract readers. Everybody benefits from that. It's a win-win.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. I love that idea of giving back. You know what I mean? Like, I think for anybody, like, somebody who's at your stage or someone who's small like myself, I mean, still we have like a responsibility to like give back to the, to people who are trying to who are like a couple steps behind us or a lot of steps behind us. Right.
There's no one who has any measure of success in publishing who didn't get help along the way, whether it was a class they took, a conference they went to, or somebody who just stepped up. And, I don't know if you know my backstory with Ray Bradbury.
Yeah. And actually, I'd love for you to get into that because I've read that, but I think it'd be great for people to hear that.
Well, for those watching, here's the situation. I went to a school. I grew up in Philadelphia, terrible neighborhood in Philadelphia, still rated as the most violent neighborhood in the city.
Oh, wow. Yeah. My dad's from Philly as well.
Yeah. And I grew up in Kensington, which is not only, it was poor and violent, it was also the most racist neighborhood in the city.
Wow.
My father, who I was not a fan of, he even ran the local chapter of the KKK. So it was a terrible environment for someone to grow up in. But I met a librarian who literally changed the course of my life. She was a librarian in my middle school. And when I had, I'd first discovered the Black Panther character in the early issues of Fantastic Four. And when I took one of those issues to her and I said, why does my father, because she had met my father at parent-teacher meetings and was not a fan either.
Right.
I said, can you tell me why he hates this so much? And she said, well, this particular issue is about apartheid. I'm like, what's that? And she's like, okay, do you know what the Jim Crow laws are? And I'm like, no, who's Jim Crow? I'm like, and you can see her losing and then she said, you ever heard of Martin Luther King? And I said, yeah, he was a bad guy. My father had a party when he died. And she said,
wow.
downed because we're going to have a really long conversation. And we did. It completely opened my mind up and allowed me to create a worldview that actually is based on balance. So that alone would have been enough for me to venerate her as almost like a saint in my personal pantheon. But she was also the secretary for two different groups of professional writers. One group met in Philly, which was in North Philly. It was the Hyborian Legion of all fantasy writers.
Okay.
Sprague Camp was the guy there. In fact, this book right over my shoulder, Conan the Wanderer, is the very first book I ever bought, and it was mostly written by Sprague de Camp, Lynn Carter, using unfinished Conan manuscripts.
Oh, I have to ask you, did you have like all the Conan, all the books that or whoever those put that, do you have them? I can see one.
Yeah, that's Conan the Wanderer. It's one of the books in the series. It's one of the few books in the series that did not have a Frank Frazetta cover.
Right.
But I have all the originals. But that is actually the first book I ever bought. But so I got nice. Yeah. I got to the fantasy world pretty well through the Philly group. But the real big thing is she also was friends with a publisher who lived in New York. And whenever there were enough genre writers, and we're talking 1970, right? Whenever there were enough genre writers in town, he would have a cocktail party. So since there were a lot of genre writers and books launched in New York, especially back then, there was always a party once a month. So she would bring me up there. She got my grandmother to forge my father's signature. He thought I was at football camp. And went up there. And the very first time I was up there, she introduced me to Ray Bradbury, Richard Matheson, Harlan Ellison, and Avram Davidson. And the weird thing is I didn't actually know who Bradbury was at the time because I was reading mostly Edgar Rice Burroughs. And I said, "Oh, are you a writer too?" And everybody and I'm like, what did I say wrong? And Bradbury being Bradbury, he's like, I've taken a swing at it once or twice. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. Love
it.
Over
the course of like the 3 years I was in that middle school where she was bringing me up, every time they knew I was coming up with her, they would bring, Matheson and Bradbury would bring me shopping bags full of books. I think she told them I was also a poor kid too. And first it was their own books. Then it was books of every kind.
Wow.
And we would have long discussions about not only writing from a reader's perspective, but writing from a writer's perspective. And Bradbury and Matheson gave me tons of great advice. And years later, I got the very last cover quotes from both Matheson and Bradbury for the 10th anniversary edition of my first novel.
Oh, that's amazing.
Came in just after the first novel was published, but they were intended for the first novel. But the editor decided to hold on to them until we did an anniversary issue, and they're there. And man, I may have ugly cried when I got those.
Yo, I bet. Oh man!
But it was amazing, and that's all because a librarian changed the course of my life. And the other part of that is I was doing some writing for Marvel Comics in 2008 and 2009, and Reggie Hudlin, who was writing, and he's the founder of BET Network. He's an Academy Award producer, great guy. He had been writing the Black Panther comic, and he heard me discussing my background on a radio interview, and heard that story about my father and all, and how Black Panther was the turning point in my life. So he went to the editor-in-chief and president of Marvel and said, "I want Maberry to follow me on the book." And so he brought me in, and he said, also, Maberry's been teaching women's self-defense for 35 years. So let's do this. Why don't, he says, in the end of my run, I'm going to have T'Challa get injured by Dr. Doom and can't be the Panther anymore. We're going to bring in his sister. Now, in the comics, by the way, Shuri is not a scientist. She's kind of like the party girl of Wakanda, right? He says, we're going to I'll bring him in to do, in my last run, I'll have a Shuri subplot. I'll have him write that plot. I'll do the rest of the book, but he'll write that plot. And then at the end of my run, he'll just pick up the Black Panther. So I actually got to write the first stories of Shuri in the armor. I created the Midnight Angels. I put Shuri up against Namor in 2009. And so 40% of the movie Black Panther Wakanda Forever is actually based on that comic book run. And
that's crazy.
Started because of that librarian taking the time to treat me like an intelligent person and give me the truth rather than some pap, And I believe that librarians are superheroes, and I've always believed that.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it sounds like our backgrounds aren't similar necessarily, but in terms of being young and really being into fiction and then having libraries. I mean, like when I was in middle school. Okay, now of course this was the 70s because I would never let my kid do this. But I used to go catch the bus, go down like all day Saturday. I'd spend all day at the library, and I'd walk around downtown, eat a Coney Island hot dog or whatever it was. But I would just be in the library, just exploring all the stacks, fiction, nonfiction, just everything. And the librarians, I mean, they're the unsung heroes, I think.
Oh, they really are. And my librarian had this policy that apparently she told Bradbury about, and I'll explain that in a second. But the policy was whenever I came into the library and got a book I wanted, she would make me take at least one other book in some genre that was not mine. It could be anything from gardening to romance to, whatever. But the idea was don't just know something in a narrow lane, know more. And then Bradbury started doing the same thing with his shopping bags full of books. And his lesson to me was one of the most important life lessons I ever got is know more than you are taught. Seek knowledge beyond what you are taught. And he said, by reading outside your comfort zone, you open your mind up. And by reading books about people whose experiences are not yours, you also understand people. And the world is a wonderfully big, complex, diverse place. It's beautiful if you embrace diversity. It's cold and hateful if you don't. Yeah. So where do you want to be? And yay.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Golly. And I think I feel like there's something that's getting kind of lost because like I've got 5 kids, 6 with we have like an adopted daughter, but like my older kids, they're 30, they have their own kids now, and so we got grandkids, but like that generation, they're millennials, so like they didn't read as much. They read a little bit, but not much, and then I'm so happy when I see like my teenagers now when they're reading something, they're like, oh, Dad, I'm just like my daughter's reading by James Patterson about the kids that have the wings. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah.
Maximum Ride.
Maximum Ride. Yeah, she's reading that. Even though that came out a long time ago, but like one of her friends turned her on to it. So I'm always happy when they're reading something. I'm like, yes, you need to read and just expand your mind. And it doesn't matter what you're reading. Like, I collect comic books, which I want to talk to you about the comic books. Going back to that Black Panther, was that the first time that you had written any comic books?
No, actually, when I started at Marvel, Axel Alonso, was the editor-in-chief, had read. He was in an airport in L.A. was about to fly to New York and had forgotten his Kindle. So he saw a copy of Patient Zero, my 4th novel, on a shelf as the first in the Joe Ledger series, liked the cover, grabbed it, read it on the plane. When he got back to his office the following day, he called, found my number and he called me and said, hey, I love the book. I love the way you handle action and dialogue and character development. Any chance you might possibly consider writing for Marvel? It's a good thing it was a phone call because, the look on my face must have been hilarious. But, and I said, yeah, I'm a Marvel kid. I even had the very first comic I ever bought, Fantastic Four 66.
Wow.
And he said, so he asked me to write as a kind of a tryout, an 8-page Wolverine story as a backup feature in the Wolverine anniversary issue. It's published as the book itself is published as Wolverine Flies to a Spider. And it's a William Harms main story. And then I had the 8-page backup. And he loved it. And so next thing he gave me was a Punisher one-shot, 34-page in the Marvel Max line, which is
okay.
And then I think Marvel Zombies was next. And while I was doing Marvel Zombies, I did that radio interview about my childhood. And so Reggie, who I'd met a couple of times at the Marvel offices, we got along great. He's such a nice guy. And he's like, when they told me, I thought it was a joke. Because, I'm noticeably not black. And they had been hiring black writers for Black Panther, which I totally understood and endorsed.
Sure.
He's, as he pointed out, Black Panther isn't just a hero for black people. He's a hero. He is a character of nobility that anyone can hold as an example of, I want to be that guy. Even I would want to stand in the shadow of that guy because he is Marvel's. He and Captain America are the 2 most noble characters they've created.
Yes.
And I love that about them. And Reggie even did a story where the 2 of them were together. I think it's Flags for Our Fathers.
Oh, I read that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
is that that's where they fight initially, right?
Yeah. And that always happens. I mean, when they introduced the Black Panther, he basically beat up the Fantastic Four. just to find out if they were tough enough to help him fight Claw.
Oh
So
my gosh.
it's wild. But writing for Marvel was crazy. I wrote for them until shortly after, like a year or two after Disney took over. But Disney began micromanaging. So a lot of us who were novelists who were brought in to write for Marvel kind of backed off at that point, because micromanaging is great if there is a point to it, rather than executives just trying to have their moment.
Right.
And so I left, and Axel left too, and a lot of the writers I knew at the time left. Reggie left.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, having written for Marvel is one of the major highlights of my life. I mean, I can always say, like, this shelf behind me is all
right.
that I've done.
Oh God, so that's amazing.
Having that in my office freaks me out at times.
Yeah, but that's instant geek cred right there. I mean, that's I mean, you have.
I've never been cool before until that. Then I had my cool moment. Oh yeah,
I love it. I love it. I love it. So I want to kind of go back since I didn't tell you the questions, but this is kind of what I wanted to ask about. Like, kind of how did you get started on your creative journey? I know we talked about Bradbury and all that, but like it struck me when you were talking about being a martial artist, because I'm a martial artist as well. So because to me, I felt like, okay, because some people don't know that you can be creative within the martial arts.
Oh yeah. Very much.
Yeah. So would you mind just kind of talking about like say like your journey in martial arts and how that kind of segued into your journey into writing fiction?
They definitely weave together. Unfortunately, because my father was such a monster and he was abusing my sisters and I started studying martial arts on the sly with my best friend who lived next door, and his father. His father hated my father. Everybody hated my father. I was studying from them, and then they would start taking me to the dojo, which ironically was in the they're like, if Kensington is the white desert, 33rd and Columbia was the black desert. I mean, it was both places where crime, low income, hate, and so on. And they were. It's sad that the city of brotherly love has neighborhoods like that, but that's
Sure.
where the dojo was. So they would take me to the dojo, and there were only 3 white kids in the whole dojo and 117 other students. And my instructor, who was a black man who had gone into the military after the Korean War, or during the Korean War, and wound up becoming a captain in the Army Rangers in Vietnam. Now imagine how much it takes for a black man to go from a private soldier to a captain in the racist American, military at the time. It was incredible. He was my instructor. I stayed with him up until his death. And I recently just passed my 60th year in martial arts.
What was that first martial art that you studied, by the way?
I started out with Hapkido, but because the dojo they taught Hapkido and Jiu-Jitsu, because originally Hapkido, the very original Korean Hapkido, was an attempt to teach Jiu-Jitsu. But since the Japanese had basically occupied Korea, they didn't want to call it Jiu-Jitsu, so they gave it a new name they called Hapkido.
Oh, right. Okay.
Which basically means the same thing. But over the years, Hapkido has come to look more like Taekwondo, where it's a lot more high kicks and flashy stuff. But the style of jiu-jitsu I studied, Shinohara Ryu Jiu-Jitsu, is a very old samurai family. It is not pretty. It was a combat style. Right. So it's kind of hard, like you do demonstrations and it looks brutal. So it doesn't look like Hakuryu Jiu-Jitsu is very flowery. It's a lot of the wrist locks and big throws. Very entertaining to watch. Shinohara Ryu Jiu-Jitsu, not so much entertaining to watch unless you are a fighter.
Right. Yes. And it's not all groundwork either.
Oh no! In fact,
it's all mostly stand like Wally J's, right?
Yeah, ground is where you go if everything else has gone wrong.
Yes,
and I worked for 5 years as a bodyguard and 5 years as a bouncer, and I've only went up on the floor twice, and not good places to be, especially since you don't know how many other bad guys might be there who'd like to have a basically clog dance up and down to your body if you're laying on the ground. Yes, it's silly. Anyway, so I went to college. When I was in high school, I got a scholarship to Temple University School of Journalism, because this was shortly after Watergate, and I wanted to become an investigative journalist. I did not want to become a novelist. I had no interest in fiction, even though my mentors were Matheson and Bradbury and so on.
Yeah.
I went to school for journalism. Halfway through college, I took a class on magazine feature writing and shifted away from newspaper reporting to magazine work. And from 1978, when I was still a junior in college, all the way up until about 5 years ago, I was writing nonfiction articles for different magazines. About 600 of them are martial arts and self-defense related, for black belt, like karate, and so on. But the other 600, they did about 1,200 features. The other 600 are on everything: skydiving, bartending, parenting, humor, festive winter drinks, a little bit of everything. You write what's fun. You write what you know first, then you write what you like. And so while I also got a job at Temple University after being a student to teach martial arts history, women's self-defense, and also jiu-jitsu classes, 2 credit courses in the phys ed department. And while I was there, Kendall Hunt, a small local textbook publisher, came to me and said, the guy who teaches judo here, Nur Mashera, he has a very popular class. He's been a judo instructor for a long time. He doesn't have a textbook and he doesn't like to write. Would you write the textbook for his judo class? I'm like, yeah, sure. That became my first published book.
Nice.
Somewhere around here. And then I wound up writing a number of other, textbooks on martial arts, self-defense, and so on. And then some pop culture martial arts books, for mass market, small press in Pennsylvania. And then I got to a weird point where I wanted to honor my grandmother, who I loved dearly. She's the one that got me involved in folklore and supernatural stuff, but not just, her fascination with it, but the history of it, the anthropology and of it. So I did a book for the same guy who was the martial arts publisher, but he asked me to do it under a pen name because he was afraid my martial arts readers would think I'd gone nuts if I started writing about vampires and werewolves and history. But that book, The Vampire Slayer's Field Guide to the Undead, outsold my martial arts books collectively 30-1.
Wow.
And that got me interested in looking for folkloric versions of monsters in popular fiction. Because even though I was writing nonfiction, I love reading fiction. But it's very hard to find a folkloric version of a monster in fiction. Mostly they're retreads of Dracula or those types of vampires. But things like sunlight only affects one vampire species in all of folklore, and that's the Chinese Zhengxia. Didn't affect European vampires. Stake through the heart. It's never used to kill a vampire. It was used to hold a vampire down so you could decapitate it and do the ritual exorcism. The whole thing about a cross being a weapon against vampires was put into it by Bram Stoker, who was Irish Catholic, and so on. Werewolves, Cycle the Moon, The Curse, all that was made up in 1941 by Kurt Siodmak for the Wolfman movie. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to find folkloric versions, the older, because they're weirder and scarier, and there's hundreds of different variations. So my wife got tired of me complaining about it and said, just write the damn thing. So that's how I got my first novel written.
I love it.
I sat down and spent 3.5 years researching and writing my first novel, Ghost Road Blues. I wrote it to get it out of my system so I could go back to what I felt was more serious work, which is nonfiction. But in the process of writing it, I fell in love with fiction. And the book, I got an agent really fast. She sold it to the second publisher who looked at it. It was published in 2006, won the Bram Stoker Award for Best First Novel, and also nominated for Novel of the Year, but I lost to some cat named Stephen King.
I don't even know who that guy is.
He's an up-and-coming kid. He may have a future,
Yeah.
And but it's funny because when I met Steve for the first time, shortly after that at the Edgar Awards, different award thing, we sat for an hour together and talked to him and his wife and his 2 sons, Joe Hill and Owen, and we had a great time. And he gave me some really foundational advice on how to write fiction, and I've been applying that as I go along. And Steve and his family are still good friends. So it's a weird journey. Now that book came out in 2006. I am writing my 52nd novel since then. And I've written and sold 170 short stories, 28 graphic novels or runs of comics, collecting the graphic novels, and edited 26 anthologies. So I've been busy since in the last 18 years, almost 19 years since I started writing fiction.
Oh, that is such an incredible journey. And one thing stood out to me when you said the date. So it was like 2006. You said like when you first sold your first novel.
It was published in 2006.
When it was published
in early 2005.
Oh, okay. And if I'm doing my math correct, you were like late 40s by then, maybe?
66. Oh, by then I was 48 when it came out.
Yeah. because because like I kind of started like this creative journey later on in life as well, and I think that's really so important for people to hear, like, because some people think that, oh, it's just a young person's game, this and that, and and that could, like acting or singing or whatever it is, whatever creative thing that they're doing. But I love the fact that, like, that you started finding success in what other people consider later years, but that you weren't like a spring flower when you started finding that success.
Well, I think there's a reason behind that. There's a number of other writers who have started a little later. Sometimes your life experience is what gives you the insight into people, into situations. A deeper knowledge base that you've acquired over those years allows you to write with a little more agency and authority. I think sometimes it's the older writers or the middle-aged writers, whatever, who are getting into it, who are bringing that life experience and infusing their fiction with it. And really makes the books nice and solid. And a lot of writers have gone that journey, but it is the newbies, the fresh kids, who get the press, but we still make the sales,
Right.
Books sell. And, except I'm writing my 52nd, I've got 9 more sold that I haven't written yet.
Oh my God, I love that. I love
also
that.
love my agent too, by the way. Sarah Crow, she's amazing.
Has she been your same agent the whole time?
Yeah, she's moved to different agencies, but I've stayed with her. She is one of those agents that she started out at Trident, one of the biggest agencies. She was John Silversack's assistant, working together on Dean Koontz, Tom Clancy, and Deepak Chopra's books. Okay. So she's used to working with big titles, big numbers, big, and so on. So she brought that, when she started her own list, she kind of brought that sensibility with her. So she had a deep experience with one of the, possibly the biggest agents. I think they might be the biggest literary agency. She brought that with her to becoming her own agent, and she moved to a couple different agencies. Now she has her own, Sarah Crow Literary. And I went with her, and to say we've made each other financially comfortable, which is real nice considering I grew up poor as hell,
Yeah.
I like to work fast. I write 3 to 4 novels a year. I like to write fast. And she knows that. I also like to write in different genres. And that allows her to sell books in different genres that won't compete against each other.
Yes. Yes. And so then just talking about your process a little bit, because there's so many things I want to just kind of jump into, but
I got plenty of time.
Awesome. So like your process, so you say you write fast. I mean, so like it and I know, writing's a process, and so it took you about 3 years on that first novel, but
3.5 years.
So like, what would you say is your average time of writing when you sit down to write a novel?
Well, I write 8 hours a day. It's my job. And I have obviously business stuff, including some Hollywood stuff that I have to do, but I try to do between 3,000 and 4,000 words a day. Okay. The absolute minimum I allow myself is 2,500 words, because 2,500 words will get any novel done in 3 months if you're doing 2,500 words. People don't realize even if you wrote a page a day, you'd have a novel done in less than a year.
Yeah.
But 2,500 words is my minimum. I try to shoot for 3,000 or 4,000. I like that pace. But my process when I start a book is like I'm writing right now the 15th Joe Ledger novel, but I'm doing research on the next book, which is not a Joe Ledger book. The next book is the second book in the Sleepers War series, science fiction alien invasion series. So I'm doing research on that, and plotting that out so that by the time the current book is done, I'll take a week or 2 off to do short stories, and then I can dive right into that because it's plotted, it's researched, it's ready to go.
Right.
And I do spot research, of course, for both along the way. I have quite a few experts in different fields. I have an astronomer, a molecular biologist, a virologist, a couple of people from the State Department, people I know I've made contacts with over the years, who I can send an email to, get an answer, and plug it right into the book and keep going. I also have to budget in time for conventions and and editing, because I edit Weird Tales magazine and edit anthologies. So a lot of it is time management. So part of the process, or actually part of the ways to make the process successful, is to pay attention to your process. You look for ways in which you're wasting your own time, and you look for things that maximize the time, and you make adjustments, make little course corrections. Like I could spend an entire day just looking at dog videos. I'm a dog guy,
Right.
I could spend an entire day watching 1980s rock and hip hop videos because I love the music of the era. But that isn't getting work done. So instead, when I like, I even dress for work. My office is right next to my bedroom. So it's 6 steps from my bed to here. And yet I dress for work. I approach it as a job, even though it's
Yes.
creative, it's still a job. I now have an assistant, which is really insane. She lives up in Northern California, so she does my editing and manages my website and newsletter. And she's also a novelist, Dana Fredsteig, excellent novelist. I have an agent. Um, I have a literary agent now, a book to film agent, Dana
Oh,
Spector.
okay.
She literally handles what it sounds like, books to film. And I have a good accountant and a financial advisor, so I don't misuse the money I'm making. It's so tempting when an advance comes in to think, oh, that's money I can play with. Well, you got taxes and you got
Sure.
bills. You got to allow yourself some money for fun, but you also have to be practical because paychecks for writers, even when you know a paycheck is going to come, may not come on time, and it may be further apart, or the editor may decide to make a change, or the publisher may decide to push the book back a year. All of those things are, part of the real world. If the first book does well, but a second book slacks off, publisher may not publish the third book, which means you don't
Oh,
have income from that. So you have all these things you have to pay attention to because it is a business. And so my process is part business and part creativity. And one thing I do that has managed to increase my productivity greatly. A couple things. First, I read poetry aloud every day before I write prose, usually about half an hour's worth,
oh, wow.
because poets have that enviable ability to distill complex images and thoughts down to a few words, a few phrases.
Hmm.
And a writer who pays attention to that is able to beautify their book with, by exploring the beautiful language that we have available. But you have to know how to do it. And you can, so to me, poets, and I also read a lot of spoken word and read a lot of song lyrics because they are also poems,
Yes.
but I read them, I perform them, I say them as if I'm, performing that. So that also informs me about inflection and intention, of what the writer might have meant. So that's one part of the process. The other part of the process that helps I was on a panel with Dean Koontz, and he mentioned something that he said one of the things that really works for him is that when he plots something out, he writes the opening, and then he jumps forward and writes the end.
Oh,
And
wow.
by writing the end, he knows where it's going. He's less likely to do tangential stuff that would later have to be cut because it doesn't really serve the story. So I started doing that. It tripled my novel speed and cut my short story speed at least in half, from 3 or 4 days to like a day and a half. And that productivity is it's a great benefit to my career and to my business.
That's amazing. I mean, it tripled your productivity. Wow. That's
Well, I mean,
crazy.
I'm now able to write a 170,000 word novel in 3 months, which
That's a
is
lot.
it's the average. I mean, my novels range between 140 to 180,000 words. I have some longer, some shorter, but I only allow myself 3 months to get each book done. So if you're efficient, and again, that's process, you can get that work done and go on to your next project and your next and your next. Everything's calendared, everything is budgeted for time. And as a result, I have more products going out the door, which means there are more potential sales and therefore more income streams to pay the bills and support my family and allow me to do a lot of charitable works as well. So process benefits everyone.
Oh, that's amazing. God, that is a gem. I'm taking notes in my head. I'm not taking notes here, and I remember you mentioned some of these things. Now that I'm thinking about it, you mentioned some of these in the masterclass on short story writing, but yeah.
Yeah, there are some things that show up in each masterclass because they're key elements. And like I'm doing one on the 24th of this month on what happens after you have your first draft done, from first draft to bookshelf, and all the different things, business etiquette, finding an agent, querying. But there are some elements in there, like I did a class on revision strategies, but yet we'll talk revision strategies in that workshop, the new workshop. You were in the short story class, but we'll talk about short stories as a way of increasing your visibility to editors while you're trying to sell your novel.
Yes.
A lot of it interweaves. If you want a complex career in fiction, that opens a lot of creative doors. And I want to be able to write as much as will sell and
Of
have
course.
fun doing it.
Yes. And I love how you talked about poetry because it's funny because I'm in an MFA program right now. And,
Awesome.
I'm doing the fiction emphasis because I never had a formal, well, like a lot of people don't have a formal education. But so at some point in time over the years, I feel like I've got gaps in my knowledge. So I just wanted to so I'm really just doing it for me. And I've been taking all these different fiction classes. And I decided this time to take a poetry. It's called Poetry for Prose Writers.
Oh my God, that's perfect.
Yes, and it's great because I actually have I got a couple of books here that I'm doing. But what I'm finding out is as I'm reading through the books and reading poems, I do read the poetry aloud, and there's something about that language and hearing it, and it's got a musicality to it, especially like lyrical poetry. But and I love older poetry. Like Edgar Allan Poe is one of my favorite writers. I'm like a whole Gothic kid, and I love his poetry, but I like to speak it aloud. Like I love just saying the Raven, reading that. But I love how that can infuse the prose writer's fiction. I love that.
Yeah, and in fact, one of my latest books is an anthology of poetry.
Oh yes,
I got 90 of my creative friends, actually more than 90 of my creative friends, to pick classic poems, Lovecraft, Poe, Robert Frost. Pretty much everyone picked classic poems and then write commentary about the poem they picked.
oh.
So, for a couple of reasons. Well, the book itself is actually a fundraiser to raise scholarships to send emerging writers to Superstars Writing Seminars, which is a writing conference in Colorado Springs entirely focused on the business side of things.
Oh, okay.
Traditional publishing, but it's expensive. So this will provide scholarships. And we picked poems that deal with darkness because darkness has a lot of forms. Darkness can be positive and negative. It can be all sorts of things. So we have people in here writing about supernatural stuff, sure, but also trauma, PTSD, slavery, abuse, sexism, racism. I mean, all sorts of things, and it includes so many incredible writers. Everyone I asked said yes. I'll just give you a quick. Here are just some writers: Ray Garton, Jay Bonansinga, who did the Walking Dead books, Keithy Candido, Alma Katsu,
yes,
Gregory Frost, R.L. Stein, Maurice Broaddus, and some of my actor friends. You ever watch the show From?
Yeah, I haven't got it. I haven't watched it yet. It looks intriguing. Is it great?
Scariest show on TV, but the guy who stars in it, Harold Perrineau, he was in Law. He's a buddy of mine, and he picked a poem and wrote some commentary too.
Beautiful.
There's stuff picked by a couple friends, actor friends of mine who were in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay.
And Amber Benson. Amber Benson's also a novelist as well as an actress. But it's so many of these writers, and they it's also a really good cross section of writers of different backgrounds, different races, different gender orientations, different countries, and different career experiences, and that brings to the reader who wants to really understand poetry. You get the poem, you get the commentary, and you also see some poems you might never have seen. Like a lot of people who read, a lot of the Victorian poetry, which is a lot of our foundational stuff in the pre-rationalist. Sure. They may not know anything about some of the poetry written by former slaves. They might not know poetry written by people from the Middle East who are writing about their experiences, or Native Americans who are writing about their experience. It's a big world out there, and there's so much to say if you only pause to listen to voices other than the ones that come from people who look like you.
Yes,
and that's So I'm so proud of this book. And we even did one poem where we had two different people took The Raven.
Uh-huh.
And two different people interpreted it. Scott Brick, the audiobook reader, interpreted his way, and Eileen D'Angelo, who is a poetry professor, interpreted her way, and they're completely different, which demonstrates how all poetry is infinitely variable in terms of interpretation. It means what it means to us. Almost doesn't matter what it means to the poet. It means what we take out of it. Like I take something out of The Wasteland than my poetry professor did, in college. To him, it's all about World War I. To me, it's all about going through a life that is itself a war zone. Big difference.
Oh, that's amazing. That is so amazing. Oh my goodness. Yes.
Now, is that Aliens book? Is that Bug Hunt or Phalanx?
This is Bug Hunt.
Bug Hunt. Ah, cool.
Yes, yes. So obviously, if you're on a podcast, you're not gonna be able to see this, but maybe on YouTube. But I'm holding in my hand Bug Hunt, edited by Jonathan Maberry, and I'm a huge Alien fan. Did you note the hat right there? Do you see my hat?
Yes, I've noticed the Whale in Tommy hat. Yep.
I've got that, and I've got the Wolfman adaptation, because remember that started our conversation when I logged into your masterclass. So before we jump onto the Alien train, because I know there's a lot to chop up there, kind of tell me the genesis of how the Wolfman adaptation came about. And just for anyone listening, this is the adaptation of the 2010 movie starring Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins, and Emily Blunt, which I love. Watch the unrated version; it's so much better. But so how did that come about?
All right, so when I'm sick, I marathon monster movies when I'm sick. It's just a thing. So I was sick and I was looking for werewolf films, which are among my favorite. And I was asking for suggestions of werewolf movies maybe I hadn't seen. And I even got a couple. But while I was having the conversation, you never know who's following a hashtag, right? So I get a call the next day from a woman who says she's the vice president of licensing at Universal Pictures. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. Why are you calling me? And she said her assistant was following a thread on Facebook, a discussion about werewolf movies. And she said, there's an author who started the conversation. So she reached out and said, look, here's the thing. Frankenstein, Dracula, The Invisible Man, they all started out as novels. The Wolfman never had a novel. There are werewolf novels, but there was not a Wolfman novel.
Right.
The Wolfman, as we know it, was created by Kurt Siodmak in 1941. And she said, would you have an interest in novelizing the script for the upcoming movie? And I'm like, is this a birthday present or something? So I put her in touch with my agent. They worked out the numbers, and the thing is, when you're novelizing something like that, you don't actually get to see the movie. I didn't get to. The movie came out 10 days after the book came out, and I didn't get to see that. I didn't get to see it until it was in the theaters.
Oh wow!
Only David Self's original script, and David Self had written a brilliant, nuanced.
Unforgiven. He didn't he write Unforgiven?
Yeah. He's a really great writer, and they filmed his script, and then they reshot it and cut out most of the good stuff.
Yeah,
he had a lot of nuance in there about identity and how the main character is a Shakespearean actor who plays in tragedies, which is his way of embodying other people, so he doesn't have to embody himself, but also to explore the damage of tragedy because he had a tragic childhood. Almost all of that was cut out of the movie. There's hints of it there. There's echoes of it. And then they CGI'd a lot of supernatural stuff over Rick Baker's transformation effects. It's like putting a drop ceiling in the Sistine Chapel.
True.
The movie did not do well. The unrated director's cut is better, but that's not the version showed in the theaters.
Right.
The reviewer for the New York Times said, the movie is not worth your time. Go read the book. And the book shot onto the bestseller list. That's my first bestseller.
Oh, that's amazing.
But the other thing is when they by the time they worked out the contract with me, they said, oh, and the other thing is we need it in 7 weeks. And that's a point at which you are aware that you have a heart because it's like beating in your throat at that point. It's like 7 weeks, 90,000 word novel, 7 weeks. I remember this was early on. And they said, yeah, can you do it? And my answer is always yes. And then I go figure it out. So I did it. And I did. Since I didn't get to see the movie, it didn't even know how the actors would be dressed or anything. What I did is I said, can I interpret this my own way? And they said, go crazy. So I did research and I wrote a Gothic novel. And I wrote it as a Gothic novel. And it debuted on the New York Times bestseller list, and it was #1 in the audio category, which pissed off my friend Peter Straub, who sent me a pretend angry email. His book came out the same day, and he always debuted at #1, and he debuted at #2. So he sent me a very foul email that made me laugh.
Oh, but that's so funny.
Yes, that's how that got written, and that was my first media tie-in work. And since then, I've done a lot of media tie-in. I've done Hellboy and True Blood and John Carter of Mars and so on. And I'm now the president of the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers. And the book you just had, The Aliens Bug Hunt, is a media tie-in collection. So I brought a lot of friends of mine who have written that in that zone. And that was a fun project. The first of two Aliens books I did, the other one being Alien versus Predator, Deadliest Prey.
Okay, you know what? I have to pick that one up because I think I had them both in my hand when I was looking. I was like, well, I got to go with Alien first. I have to, because Aliens is my favorite. Of the franchise, of course. I want to jump back briefly to the Wolfman because I love Gothic movies. I mean, I love all kind of movies and all kind of horror movies. But I love the things that have that Gothic influence. So, like, since you only had 7 weeks and like, was there anything that you did to reference that? Did you go back to the Lon Chaney version, or did you read any novels? Did you look at Shirley Jackson's books? I mean, like what did you? How did you prepare to like dive into the Gothic? I guess.
Well, since the Benicio del Toro version is set in the 1800s, I didn't want to reference the Lon Chaney Jr. version set in the 40s, and I knew that movie backward and forward. So instead, I reached out on Facebook to people. I said, I'm looking for people who are knowledgeable about this era of British history. And there are some historians. You never know who's following you on Facebook, or who knows somebody who knows somebody. And I, explained different setups and like what I need. Plus, I did just lots of research. There are tons of good websites out there about history if you just know how to, manage with keyword searches. And found a way to kind of put myself in that world. I've also read a lot of fiction from that era. I've read everything from M.R. James to Bram Stoker and Conan Doyle and that whole crowd. So I kind of had a feeling of the era pretty well. Of course, watch all the Hammer horror films, which are all set in that era.
Yes, of course.
And, that helped me with costuming, by the way, quite a bit.
Oh, beautiful.
And just little things. And even Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol describes a lot of the mercantile thing, what people eat, what they buy, what is selling, and things like that. All of that is research I'm doing. So I'm researching half the day, writing half the day, sometimes writing well into the night. So every day for probably the first 3 or 4 weeks, I was doing half-day research all the time, and then sending emails out so that by the time I got back to my computer the next day, there would be emails back from somebody who knew something about the topic. I'm a big fan of research. I'm a research junkie. And it's interesting, because it was on such a tight timeline, I couldn't go down too far into a rabbit hole in research. I didn't have the time. I had to find exactly what I needed. That was a good skill that I have since learned to apply to to every other project following it. And also, I had a blast writing that book.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not having fun, you're not writing the right way.
Exactly.
Got to have fun with it. No matter how weird it is, you got to have fun.
And I love how that, like, it went back to that efficiency, like, when we were talking a little bit about process, where you knew you only had 7 weeks, so you had to be efficient with your time, because it's easy to go into analysis paralysis, right? You research all the stuff, and then you're like, okay, now how do I put it all together? Like, you didn't have that time.
No, in fact, that paid off a different dividend a couple of years later. I had edited 3 X-Files anthologies for IDW, and I got to know Chris Carter pretty well, the creator of X-Files. And I had pitched a story to him about Dana Scully as a teenager, because it's alluded in the show that she used to believe, and that she had latent psychic powers. There are several episodes to establish this in season 1 and 2. So I said, well, but you never tell the story of why she stopped believing and why she kind of suppresses her psychic abilities. And I said, I have an idea. And he said, I pitched it to him, and he said, well, you have my authority to go write that. And if, let me just read it. And then he approved it as the official origin story of Dana Scully.
Oh, wow.
It was published as the novel Devil's Advocate. And my friend Cami Garcia did we closed a deal together to do this. I did Devil's Advocate with Dana Scully as a teenager, and she did Agent of Chaos as Fox Mulder as a teenager. They don't meet, of course, because they meet in the X-Files.
Sure.
But the 2 books came out under the overall heading of X-Files Origins.
Okay.
And we had a lot of fun with those books. We did a tour with them and everything else. And Chris Carter loved them. And the fun thing about working with Chris Carter and working with Fox for the Aliens thing is, if you pitch to them that you want these stories to be canon, not just alternate universe stories, but canon. It's a little extra work for the editor to make sure the stories fit, but all the X-Files stories in the anthologies and my novel are canon. All of the stories in the Aliens Bug Hunt are now canon to the alien world.
Beautiful.
That attracts bigger writers, and also the fans love it, knowing that this actually, like the X-Files stories, fit between existing episodes. They even reference some a little bit so that you can see how easily they fit. It's so much fun to do it that way.
Oh, that's great. And now we're here to talk about aliens, because honestly, I only picked this up. I've never really read. I don't think I've read. This is the only thing. This is the very first thing I read that was in the aliens oeuvre of any books, And I was like in Barnes and Noble or something like that at the time, and looking around sci-fi, and I saw your name, and I was like, wait a minute. I said, that's my werewolf guy right there. So the Wolfman, and it literally was edited by you, because at the time I just didn't know much about you. So I was like, but it is like when you read an author, you're like, okay, wait, I'm going to read the next thing. So like literally this is and I think I read your story first, and then I went back and read everybody else's stories. But I love what you say here in the introduction, because I'm reading from page 2, but I'm just going down where it says, until the summer of 1986, James Cameron hit us with Aliens. Not a remake, as so many sequels are, and not an inferior follow-up, a masterpiece, another masterpiece, brilliant and different. Where Alien was a horror movie set in outer space, Aliens was a war story set in space. I love that, because that's exactly how I felt when I watched Aliens. And for those people who haven't seen it, who aren't our age, who didn't see it in the theater, or maybe they saw a re-release, or they mostly saw it on like probably VHS or DVD, like my kids, but they don't understand the power of that movie, especially because Alien was so brilliant. But I kind of love that the war action sort of, and how we deepen the mythology. But I love how it inspired your Echo team for Joe Ledger, because
if the guy who played the sergeant in that movie was still alive, I'd want him to play the character.
Matthews.
Yeah, he was so great, but he's passed.
Apone. Yes,
Apone is just so great,
Yeah, and he was a real life soldier. I mean, like,
he really was, and also from friends I have who were involved in Aliens. Also, like a really nice guy too, like really down to earth, approachable, and he helped them with the weapons techniques and how to hold the gun and everything else.
Right.
He was great. So yeah.
Oh man, that's amazing. I don't know if you know this. Again, if you're listening to this, I'm holding up a copy of something called Aliens Expanded. It's a documentary. Have you heard about this?
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's so great. I only saw the digital version. I just received my copy not too long ago, but.
Yeah, I got the disc too. I still have a Blu-ray player,
yeah,
because there's some stuff that's not available on streaming. But I love the Aliens world, and even though there was one technical error in the Aliens that still bothers me a little bit, they left no one on the ship. Everyone went down to the planet.
Right, everybody, not even a pilot.
At least an anchor watch, somebody should be up there. But but that's also a movie where the expanded version has a lot of wonderful depth to it. It has Newt's backstory a little bit, and has longer fight scenes and more character development. So I'm a big fan of expanded versions of everything.
Yes. So then this leads me into like the media tie-ins. I mean, so how did you get into media tie-ins, and then, but specifically then, like how did this Aliens thing come about?
Well, the media tie-in thing is an easier one, because Wolfman got nominated for what a Scribe Award, which is given out by that organization.
Okay.
I didn't know there was an organization, so I was nominated for and then won the Scribe Award for that book. And so I got more involved in it, and because I had written that, some other editors who were doing anthologies, sometimes they're at what's called out of license. Expired license, like anybody can write a Sherlock Holmes story, anybody can write a Cthulhu story. They're not under license anymore. Right. So I was invited to a Sherlock Holmes anthology, and then invited to another anthology, and then I got, as it became more well known in the writing community, I started getting invited to more official media tie-in anthologies. Like Charlene Harris, she had done it. She and I had been sitting next to each other at an event doing a book signing, became friends, and she offered me an absurd amount of money to come in and write a story in her Sookie Stackhouse True Blood world.
Oh wow!
Yes, and since then I've written probably 30 media tie-in stories. Became friends with Mike Mignola, who created Hellboy. And he and Christopher Golden, who's written a lot of Hellboy stuff, invited me into one of their anthologies. Larry Correia invited me into Monster Hunt International. So I've been in a bunch of them. And Brian Thomas Schmidt, who co-edited Aliens versus Predator with me, edited Predator anthologies, and he invited me into those as well. So the more you do it, the more invitations you get.
Sure.
But as far as the media tie-in organization itself, it was founded by Max Allan Collins and Lee Goldberg years ago to honor the people who write, this sort of stuff, because a lot of folks kind of disparage media tie-in because, there are bad ones, or bad anything, but the good ones are when the writers take this source material and go a little further. Like Alan Dean Foster's novelization of Aliens was brilliant. His novelization of Thing, brilliant. Expanded on the story and made it a true novel. And I had once I moved to California from Pennsylvania. I've been down here for 12 years now. I started going to San Diego Comic-Con, and that's where they give the Scribe Awards. So I would always be there in the audience, applauding everyone else. And I got to know Max and Max and Lee really well. And then one day after one of the awards, I had won, I think, two Scribe Awards that one year. And a bunch of us had gone out for drinks afterwards at Comic-Con. And next day, everybody started congratulating me on my acceptance of being president of the organization. I'm like,
what?
I don't remember saying that. Martinis were involved, and I don't know whether they actually asked me the question or simply said that they did, and everyone sort of congratulating me. But somehow I went up as president of the organization. Beautiful. It's a little sketchy. When I ask those guys, they say, "Yeah, we talked it over," and then they changed the subject. So most down to they invited me to be president, and I'm having a great time. I have a great vice president, Deb Stevenson. She writes under the name Rigel Allure, and she's basically Hermione Granger. She can do anything, and it's a great group of people. And we still give out the Scribe Awards. We've expanded on them a bit, and one of the fun things is now, publishers, knowing that I'm the president of the organization, come to me and say, "Hey, we need a writer to do this."
Oh, okay.
And for example, Titan, which has the Aliens license, reached out to me and said, "We're looking for someone to do an original Aliens novel." And I suggested my buddy Scott Sigler, who would, aside from being a good friend, was the first person I asked when I did the Aliens BugCon anthology.
Right, yeah.
He went on to write Aliens Phalanx, probably my vote for the best ever Aliens original novel. It's friggin' brilliant.
I had my hands on it the other day. I was looking. I was like, "Should I get this?" But
so good. Okay. And the new editors, the editor I worked with for a lot of those has since retired. The new editor, we're talking about doing another Aliens anthology.
Oh, beautiful!
So
that's so great.
Bear that in mind, Kevin. You just took a short story class too, as I recall. So we'll have a conversation if I get that approved.
Oh, well, we'll definitely talk offline for sure. Yeah. Yes. Wow. So, I don't want to take all your time because I know you're such a busy person, and I really appreciate you even giving me this amount of time, to talk about all this. One question I have is what inspires you, because you've had a lot of success because you've won the Bram Stoker Award. You've done all these things that, like, writers who are up and coming, and again, I know you're just a man, put your pants on one leg at a time, but it really gives us something to aspire to. And but what inspires you to continue to keep growing and evolving as an artist, as a creator, as a writer, et cetera?
Well, I think I'm going back to Ray Bradbury and Richard Matheson on this. They both really infused in me the idea that you have to have fun, you have to be good at your craft, but you have to have fun, and that you should not stay in one lane. Write the story that you need to write, and then find a way to sell it. Matheson, if you look at his work, What Dreams May Come, I Am Legend, Stir of Echoes, Somewhere in Time, he's all over the damn place. Ray Bradbury wrote science fiction and fantasy and mysteries and everything else. Again, all over the place. They wrote the stories they were most passionate about. And Bradbury said it well, don't just write the story that you want to read. Write the story you would go out of your way to hunt down and read. Write a story that you're so passionate about that passion, no matter how dark the material, that passion is going to shine through. And that, when I found my old notes from having met him as a kid, and I'm looking at that, I'm like, that is a manifesto, and it inspired me. Plus, I just love writing. There's no part of the writing world I don't love. Even the tough stuff, like sometimes you get really, really aggressive edit notes on a book, and you're like, really? I thought the book was better than that, but that's the editor wants to take it from what you wrote to what we'll sell,
right?
And, but that's fun. That becomes like a video game. It's a challenge. Like how do I fix that in the available time? It allows you to also, one of the weirdest side effects, the more you focus on the business of writing and being good at it and being agreeable within that community, the more work comes to you.
Oh, okay.
I get as much work for the fact that I am not demonstrably a jackass as I get for being a decent writer.
Right.
They want to work with somebody who's not a problem child, who's not going to make it all about me, and who's not so weirdly precious about their writing that they refuse to take criticism or an edit. I'm not that guy. As an editor also, I understand that, every book that's ever been written has benefited from edits. So work with the editor, not against them. Even when I just finished edits with on Cold War, the second book of my new Necrotech series, I decide, I do what I often do. If I know I'm going to be edited, I do a Zoom call with the editor first to get to know them as a person. Make them not afraid of me, and therefore I'm not nervous about what they're going to say. I don't care if the edits are harsh, but if they understand me, they'll understand the book better. And also, I'm making now a new colleague within the business. And, it's I don't approach this as an adversarial thing. I approach writing and publishing as a pop culture geek being let off the leash to have as much fun as possible, as long as they understand that writing is art and publishing is business.
Right.
And if you understand the difference between the two, you can have a lot of freaking fun and you can make some money. And also, as an editor, the more I get involved in writing, the more opportunities come along for me to bring my friends in. Bring in the people who I consider to be in what I call the non-jackass zone.
Right.
I want fun people who are good at their jobs. And editing Weird Tales magazine allows me to essentially, that's like its own anthology. I've got 8 short stories in the current issue, and I get to bring in all sorts of people. Like we just announced the new issue of Weird Tales yesterday. I've got stories from Delilah Dawson, Johnny Compton.
Johnny Compton from San Antonio. That's crazy.
Wayne Brady, the actor.
Wayne Brady.
I published his first short story. He's doing a novel with Maurice Broadus, who's one of my good friends. Brought him in. He wrote a really great piece of flash fiction. Delilah Dawson's in it, and Peter Klein's is in that issue. It's a killer issue. But I get to bring in people I know, and I curate most of my anthologies.
Sure.
So that I bring in the people I trust. I don't want to bring in someone who's just going to cause problems, because I don't have time for problems. I don't create problems for the editors I work with. I don't want people to create problems for me. I want it to be a continuing. You can have fun in business, and writing allows you to have fun while still being a completely unapologetic pop culture geek.
Yes.
I am super, I've got stuff all over my shelves. I even have a Funko Pop of a character based on, that I created for the Anika in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. She's based on my character. I have a Funko Pop. And we get to make stuff up for a living and get paid for it. And that sounds like it's not a real job, almost. Professional daydreamer, what's not to love?
Yeah, so amazing, and I love that collaborative spirit too, because I think that, like, I've talked to some writers or people who they want to write, but it's all about them, and they don't understand, like, you have to be collaborative and communicate, and again, like you said, not be precious. That's a major thing. Not be precious, with your writing. Like, just do the best you can, and then take the notes, and you might not agree with everything, but at the end of the day, if everybody's focused on the same goal, we just want to make it the best story possible, that will sell. I mean, I think that's great, Yeah. So
And
fabulous.
it's also, the more you understand about business and are able to become financially secure yourself, the more you look for opportunities to bring in income to writers who might be struggling.
Right.
Uh, and there are a lot of writers. I mean, probably 1% of writers live on their writing income, and the other 99% have day jobs. And that's a reality of the creative field. Most
Yeah.
writers don't make enough money to live on. Well, if I can, do a project that brings them in and gives them a nice chunk of change and enough career elevation within it so that they might get hired to do another piece for someone else and so on, that's just good for the community. It's community building.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's beautiful. I love that. And that was another reason I really wanted to talk with you, just because, I mean, I got that sense in your masterclass that again, that you like sharing and like the helping hand, as opposed to like, like, you ever heard of the crab syndrome, where people are trying to pull each other down? But I love that hey, let's, there's this community of writers, and I'm here, let me help you along. And then the next person can help the next person. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's what's great about it.
Because I figure, I mean, that librarian had no real, personal gain in
Right.
introducing me to the work she did, and the writers didn't have any personal gain in helping me. They saw someone who wanted to be a writer and they could help,
Yeah.
and they chose to, and it became a joyful thing. And Ray Bradbury, Richard Matheson, even Harlan Ellison. A lot of people think is such a cranky guy. He was cranky because writers were being taken advantage of.
Uh,
That's what made
uh,
him. And I got no stones to throw at that.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Another side effect of this whole thing is I got to know and become friends with virtually every writer who I've been reading all these years, who's still alive. And of course, some have now passed, but I got to be friends with Stan Lee. I got to be friends with George Romero, the guy who wrote,
Oh,
directed Living Day. Dead. We did a book together that's now being considered for a TV series. It's weird stuff like that. I never expected that when I started writing. I never expected to know Stephen King. I never expected to know Peter Straub and Joe Lansdale. And Joe and I are now like buds. I mean, close friends.
God, Happen Leonard's at the bomb. I love
Oh
Happen
my
Leonard.
God. He let me put Happen Leonard in one of my Joe Ledger novels.
Oh,
Happened to actually appear in the novel Relentless.
that's
Uh,
great.
yeah. F. Paul Wilson, whose books I've been reading, the Repairman Jack books I've been reading, since the late 70s. He let me put Repairman Jack in my recent in the novel Cave 13 for fun, you know. Um, and it's such a weird feeling to be around these folks. And just one example of how welcoming the writing community is. When I was my wife and I were driving from Philadelphia to Atlanta for Dragon Con one year,
Okay.
2010. And we found out just as we were getting into the car that The Wolfman had made the bestseller list. It was like, and I damn near flew, to under my own power at that point. But while we're driving, when we get to Dragon Con, because the Dragon Con people apparently found out that I had just hit the bestseller list, they asked me if I would be on a panel about New York Times bestsellers. And I'm like, I've been on the bestseller list for like a day, and I'm on that. This is the panel: Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Jim Butcher, Anne Rice, Charlene Harris, and me.
What?
I'm like, I have no business, and Kevin J. Anderson. I had
Oh,
no business being in that room. And Kevin said, "Oh, no, no, no. You're on the bestseller list. You are one of us. Doesn't matter how many times you've hit the list or how many books you've sold. If you hit the bestseller list, you're a New York Times bestseller forever." So anyone who acts holier than thou because they've been on the list sooner or more often is a jerk.
yeah.
Cut that out of your personal life. Focus on the people who say, "Oh my God, that's great. Come and join us."
Yes.
That vibe. And Kevin Anderson's become a dear friend and collaborated on a bunch of projects. In fact, he just has a new book out called Nether Station, which is in this new imprint called Weird Tales Presents. I had the
Oh,
first book, Necrotech. He's doing the second. Third book is Keith DeCandido doing Supernatural Crimes Unit. Brand new imprint at Blackstone.
wow. Oh, that's
And it's
amazing.
friends helping friends get along and making new friends and just diving into that world. And I also found that there are fewer prima donnas in publishing than I thought.
Oh, that's good
Like
to know.
genuine people, just like in Hollywood. I expected them all to be jackasses, but really not. I've rarely met someone in Hollywood. I had a Netflix show. I've got a development thing going on with the John Wick director for my Joe Ledger books. I got a movie at
Yeah.
Alcon. They're nice people, and they're also pop culture nerds who just happen to be professional pop culture nerds. And they're, it's fun. It's a surreal thing. And if I'm in a coma dreaming all this, and somebody wakes me up, I'm gonna freaking kill them because I'm having living this life, even when it's downsides and darker moments.
Sure.
You're not happy all the time. Depression's a thing that happens to everybody, and stress and so on. But you know
Yeah.
what? That's also part of the game. I have a friend who's a plumber. He also gets stressed and depressed about his job too.
Right.
Because COVID, people weren't calling him out to fix pipes. So there's that as part of every job, but there's a lot more joy if you open yourself up to it.
Yes. I love that. Oh, I love that. So couple of questions. If you could share any exciting new projects that you're working on that you can share, something that's cooking.
Sure. Well, the thing I'm probably most excited about right now is Necrotech. It's the first book in this new series. It's Deep Space Cosmic Horror, and it's NECROTEK, Necromancy and Technology, Necrotech.
Okay.
And the conceit is, while trying to develop matter teleportation on a space station near Jupiter, it goes wrong, and instead of teleporting a test capsule, teleports the entire space station to the far side of the galaxy. They're never going to get home. And they find out once they're there that creatures like Cthulhu and so on came to Earth because they were afraid of what's out there. And now we're out there facing the things that Cthulhu was afraid of. The outer gods, legions of Shoggoth, star armadas and so on. And it's one little space station trying to fight against this.
Oh,
and
jeez.
One of the conceits of the story, and the reason it's called Necrotech, is as the human pilots die in battle against these unimaginable odds, a necromancer who's part of a religion, an Earth religion, summons their ghosts back and helps them, using also in partnership with the ghost of an alien who's been fighting this war for millions of years, puts them inside these giant spaceships, and the spaceships are changeable. Once they're inside, the radiation allows them to change the spaceship in any form. So it becomes like a shape-shifting giant mech. Imagine a spaceship that turns into one of the Pacific Rim Jaegers.
Oh yeah,
that sort of piloted by ghosts. And the longer they pilot it, the more the radiation it gives them the power also erodes their human soul. Eventually, if the war goes on long enough, their souls will be utterly destroyed.
Oh, wow.
So there's that element too. And the book is wild and weird. A lot of philosophy, a lot of weird action, a lot of humor. And I just finished the second one called Cold War, and I'm about to start. I've probably by February I'll be writing the third book in the series, and I just have an amazing time with it. So there's that project. My epic fantasy trilogy just wrapped. Latest one, the third in that was the Dragon in Winter.
Right.
Publishers reached out to me and said, "Have you ever thought about writing epic fantasy?" And I'm like, I started out reading Conan, so yeah. And 3-book deal, and I wrote the Kagan the Damned book, which was the first.
Yes, yes.
We're having discussions with some producers about a possible development. What else is going on? I'm doing there's a couple of things I can't talk about, but there's like one of the things I mentioned earlier with Night of the Living Dead. George and I did the anthology Nights of the Living Dead, plural. And I'm working with, have you ever seen the show Psych?
I've seen parts of it. Yeah. The comedy, right?
The guy who starred in that, James Roday, now using his full name of James Roday Rodriguez, he's a huge horror fan. So he and I are actually in discussions with Peacock Network about developing that for television.
Oh, wow.
That's an anthology show, even though it's an anthology, but taking 3 stories and using those characters as an ongoing thing. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff happening. And the Joe Ledger graphic novel is coming out in early 2025. It's being
great.
Everywhere I turn, there's some new fun projects. Working in discussions with a British publisher about doing kind of 1980s creature feature novelettes or novellas.
Oh.
He wants mostly sea stuff. He says, think about things like The Abyss, Deep Star Six, Leviathan, modern films like Underwater, weird stuff
Seen all of
happening
those.
on the ocean.
Yes.
And so I might be doing some of those, and that could be a lot of fun. And the other thing that I would love people to pay to reach out and try, I have a book out called it's the series is called The Sleepers War. First book is Alpha Wave. I co-wrote it with Weston Oakes, who was a great guy. He was a staff sergeant in the Army intelligence, really good-hearted guy, and he died right after the book came out. And there are two more books in the series I'll be writing alone, but sales of the books will also benefit his widow and family. So, and we wrote one rollicking adventure, and it is a massive doorstop of a book with aliens and space battles and all sorts of intrigue and weirdness. We had a lot of fun with it, and it's in paperback, ebook, and audio read by Ray Porter, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. It was my first published straight science fiction novel for adults.
Oh, wow.
And I'll be doing the next one in that series soon, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. So I got lots of stuff. Also, if there are any writers listening to this podcast, if you go to my website, jonathanmaberry.com, spell my last name right, it's Maberry, Maberry.com. On that website is a page called Free Stuff for Writers.
Yes.
Where there are comic books, script sample, novel script sample, or notes on the 3-act structure, how to write a synopsis, all free downloadable PDFs. Go grab what you need and share it with your writer friends.
All right. And what I'll do is I'll make sure and link your website on everything here, just that way that people can access that.
And there's also one other thing I would like to know.
Absolutely.
I run this thing called the Writers Coffee House. I started it 25 years ago in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, but we have different groups around the country. Mine meets in San Diego at Mysterious Galaxy Books on the first Sunday of every month, which will be this Sunday. But we have a Facebook page with a couple of like 4,000 or 5,000 people from around the world on there. You can use as a brag board, show your latest publication. You can ask questions. You can ask people for recommendations of editors and agents. There's so many people on there, and everybody's waiting to help. So go use that resource, and it's free.
Oh, this is a wealth of information here. I love it. And I loved about all the projects you were talking about. And I remember something that you said. You said this in the short story masterclass, and you said it earlier in the interview where you said you always say yes to things as opposed to like, oh, I can't do that. Or maybe, you say yes. And I love that philosophy.
Well, I mean, writers should be, if nothing else, perpetual students. We should be always willing to learn more about our craft and about more about. So like when Marvel called me up, and asked me if I'd like to write for Marvel, I had never seen a comic book script. I didn't know what a comic book script looked like. All I knew is that the writer gives the art direction and picks how many panels are on each page, as well as writing the dialogue. So, I said yes, because why wouldn't I say yes? And then I went into a bookstore that had a coffee shop, sat down with a comic book, and reverse engineered it back to a script to try to see what the script should have looked like to result in that comic. Well, that's me being a student. It's a study project I gave to myself. When my agent took one of my novellas and said she'd like to shop it as the opening of a YA novel, and I had not written it as a YA novel, I said yes, and then start reading what was happening in YA these days, because I hadn't read YA since To Kill a Mockingbird in the 7th grade. And I found that YA had blown up into something amazing, and she went up selling it, and that's Rotten Ruin.
Rotten Ruin, yeah.
8,800 schools around the world, and it's being made into a film.
That's great.
Here's another example of saying yes. I may have mentioned this in a short story class. John Joseph Adams, a great anthologist, reached out to me and said, would you be interested in writing a Wizard of Oz story? And this was early in my novel career, where I'd only been writing intense horror novels. And I'm like, first off, why would you ever ask me to write a Wizard of Oz story? And he said, well, you seem to be willing to try other things, because I'd written some short stories in different genres. So I sat down, and I wanted to write a gory horror story with a Tin Man going on a rampage with his axe, but I didn't, restrain myself. I reread the first couple of Wizard of Oz books. It got into the mind of who's reading those. Little kids. Sometimes it's their first books they read are the Wizard of Oz books.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And all that stuff is not what they're looking for. They're looking for a charming adventure with a happy ending. So I wrote a little story that I thought was a charming fun story for kids. Didn't expect it to get any notice, but I felt at least was in the right zone. And then it was accepted. It got mentioned in a bunch of reviews. And then the estate of L. Frank Baum, the creator of Wizard of Oz, reached out to me and said that they loved the story so much, they added it officially as a prequel to the Wizard of Oz, and it is now an official part of the Wizard of Oz world.
Oh, that is so beautiful.
And it's insane. It's just because I said yes to an editor asking me to go outside my comfort zone. And it's funny. One of my favorite YouTube influencers is a group called Yes Theory. I have one of their pendants on. One side it says love over fear, and the other side says seek discomfort.
Oh,
go outside your comfort zone.
God, I love that. What's it called? Yes Theory?
Yes Theory. This great group of guys. They go all over the world. They go to the most extreme places, do the wildest things just to see what adventure is there, what people they can meet, and how they can grow as human beings from exposure to all these different cultures around the world. Fantastic stuff.
Oh my gosh. I probably deep dive into that one.
Yeah, it's great. Their videos are, some of their stuff is just fun and silly. Some of it is really.
Oh, that's so great. All right. So 30 seconds or less. I'm going to ask you just a couple of things. One, I already know the answer to because you said earlier, but I'm going to say it again. All right. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie of all time is The Haunting, actually.
Oh, Shirley Jackson, right?
Yeah, Shirley Jackson. My favorite horror novel of all time is also The Haunting. But I guess my second favorite movie is the George C. Scott version of The Christmas Carol.
Oh, that's such a good one. Very gothic too. God, I love that one.
Yeah.
All right, favorite song to sing to?
Oh, the entire Tom Waits catalog. Probably. That is a tough one. Favorite song to sing to? Because I sing a lot because I used to be in bands a lot. I was lead singer in a lot of cover bands. It's probably Tom Trolbear's Blues by Tom Waits, which is also a heartbreak song.
Oh yeah, that's so cool. If somebody would ask me this, I'm always trying to sing "Wanted Dead or Alive" Bon Jovi, but I'm trying to sing both Richie and John's part, so that's hard to do. All right,
best place. Some pretty wild, complex playlists.
Oh, love it. All right, best place you've ever visited?
Tuscany, the town of Lucca in Tuscany for Lucca Comics and Games, the biggest Comic-Con in Europe, 500,000 people. And I was there as a guest at the Comic-Con there, and I had the best time. And I loved Tuscany so much that after we were done in Lucca, I took my wife to Florence for 3 weeks, where she basically shopped, and I finished a novel. And yes, I love saying finish a novel in Tuscany. I will never not love saying that. But if I ever left the United States for anywhere, I would move to Tuscany.
Oh, good place. I'm going to put that on our list of places my wife and I want to go. Oh, that's great. All right. Best way to relax?
Oh, sitting on my balcony with my dog, a cup of good coffee, and a book of poetry. That's and listening to maybe Joe Pass or Wynton Marsalis playing jazz guitar. That'll do it for me.
These are good. And I already know the answer to the last one. I'm going to say it. Cats or dogs?
Oh, dogs. No, I do love cats, evil as they are. Well, I'm a dog guy. I've got Rosie, my little rescue dog, and then we're fostering a puppy right now that we're looking to find a good home for. She was a street dog in Tijuana and was rescued by a group, and she's 5 months old and 6 pounds and incredibly adorable. So if anybody listening to this is in the San Diego area and is looking for a rescue dog that we are training, who's been spayed, had all her shots, drop me a line.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's funny because I had a dog growing up, but I can't say I was a dog person until I married my wife. But now we got 4 dogs. One older one who he's kind of almost like those Bernese mountain dogs, somewhat like that, but a bit of a mutt. And then we have one who's like a Staffordshire pit. They call it the San Antonio breed because they're all over the place, and she's like not quite middle-aged yet. And then I was having some PTSD issues. I'm former military beginning of the year, and I was going through a rough time, and I have what I call my PTSD puppies, because I had to get 2 puppies at the same time. That's crazy. So, but they're beautiful, man. Love them.
Dogs are pure love. They're wonderful and they're great companions. And if you train them and treat them right. And
yes.
I've never met a dog, an angry dog that wasn't mistreated.
Right.
And that's the thing. And you mentioned pit bulls. They get such a bad reputation. They are naturally loving dogs. You treat them, turn them into a monster, you got a monster. Treat them like you actually care about them. They will give you love beyond your ability to take in more. I mean, they're like that. So, and I grew up with shepherds, and my first dog was a Doberman Mastiff mix. And he was the runt of the litter, so we thought he was going to be small, 225 pounds.
Oh, geez.
Monster dog, complete goofball. We had fun, and he was born on Halloween. He was known as my grandmother, who was also born on Halloween, bought it, gave him to me. There's a photo of her hands holding the puppy, reaching out to me, and we named him Spooker because he was spooky because it was Halloween and he was all black. And I love the dog. I love that dog. But yeah, dogs, definitely dogs. I'm a dog guy.
That's so great. Well, and on that note, I want to say thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show.
My pleasure, Kevin.
God, it's been great just chatting with you.
I love it. I wish we were doing this over coffee somewhere,
Yeah, exactly. So, maybe I'll make my way out to San Diego someday.
Well, if you ever come to San Diego, I can get you I can get you a 4-day pro pass to Comic-Con. Bear it in mind.
Ooh, might have to do 2 because I know my 17-year-old. He's going to be like, Dad, this is our thing. We got to go.
I can get that. I won their Inkpot Award, and as one of the side effects, I can get anybody I want into Comic-Con. And I'd like to share that with friends. So if you and your son want to come out to Comic-Con, I guarantee you tickets.
Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I really love talking with you, and we got to do this again.
Oh yeah, we definitely got to do this again, Kevin. And thanks for inviting me on. And for anyone who's listening, if you're a reader, read deeply and go outside your comfort zone. You'll find amazing stuff. And if you're a writer, write with joy. And that's the best advice I can give.
I love it. That's beautiful. Thanks so much.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'm going to go back and write now.
All right. Hey, thanks again for listening and watching this interview with Jonathan Maberry. He was a fantastic guest, very generous with his time, and I really loved chatting with him. And I hope to have him on the podcast and this channel at some point in time in the future. So thank you very much. And as I mentioned, in the description is where I'll put his bio and his website, so that way you can check that out and read some of his work because he's fabulous. So thank you very much. God bless. Bye-bye.